Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. I teach beginners French class, so I'm like resisting the urge to say bonjour.
Don't worry, I don't know anything in French.
And so like now I'm like,
Bonjour.
wait, transition. It's good to finally meet you. I'm Rutendo. I'm Helen's research assistant and working on the website for the Transitional Justice Research Network.
It's a pleasure to meet you too.
No, it's such a pleasure
I,
to.
I am here sitting in the hallway because
Oh,
I'm in a hotel and my colleague is resting because we have a flight and we are traveling all night. So
oh
she's
wow.
resting, so I've come out to talk to you.
No, not
Yeah.
a problem at all. I won't keep you too much.
Yeah.
All right. The purpose of our feature interview really is to get a sense of, what you're working on, who you are, what motivates you, that kind of thing. So I'm just gonna ask you some open-ended questions and you make of them what you will. And then
Wonderful.
yeah, no, and then we'll take it from there. Obviously, if there's some follow-up questions that I have, I'm just gonna ask you based on obviously what you said. You can just start from tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Fatou Baldeh MBE. I am a women's rights advocate, and my work very much focuses around gender justice. Over the last 3, 4 years, since 2018, I've been working on transitional justice as the Gambia has been going through a transitional justice process after 22 years of dictatorship. And in line with that, my work has concentrated on bringing out the experiences of women and marginalized communities in the Gambian transitional justice process. Yes.
And so when did you specifically start working in activism and like
Yeah.
women's rights activism in the Gambia?
Yeah. So I actually started off working on advocating against female genital mutilation. I am a survivor of FGM, and my work very much started in highlighting the fact that female genital mutilation is a violence against women. Is a form of sexual and gender-based violence, and the impact that it has on women and girls. So that's how I started off before I really got into the whole transitional justice process. But that's how my activism started. As a survivor, I want to make sure that girls don't continue to experience this form of gender-based violence that continues to affect them for their entire lives. And in doing that, because I had already had this experience in women's rights, my background also, I have a master's in sexual and reproductive health. So because of that experience of activism in the area of female genital mutilation and my background of sexual and reproductive health and rights, when the Gambia transitional justice process started, I knew that from working at community level and working with women, that women face many barriers when it comes to talking about their experiences, especially on issues regarding sexual violence. So that is what really motivated me to bring in my experience around gender and women's rights and incorporated it in the transitional justice process to amplify the voices of women.
Also, TJ started like, I fit there.
Yes, so I remember like TJ was nothing to, I didn't even know anything about TJ. I just happened to attend it was a CSO training on transitional justice. And then I remember sitting in the room, and at that point, our Truth Commission Secretariat was just being set up, and they were giving us a background on all the things that they've been doing, how they've been consulting people on the Truth Commission and getting ideas. So I remember saying, hello, I have a question. How are you engaging women? And then the speaker was like, but what do you mean? We are not engaging men, we are engaging everybody. And I was like, yes. But in your statement, you said that you are engaging community leaders and religious leaders and all that. And I'm like, in the Gambia, how many religious leaders are women? How many community leaders are women? So when you talk about engaging these people, how are you making sure that in that engagement you are also including women? And for me, that was when it clicked that, yes, when we say we are engaging communities, how do we make sure that in that process, we go the extra mile, we make sure we are cognizant of the fact that, for instance, in the Gambian community, when you bring men and women together, women do not speak. Culture and society tells us that when you bring men, especially older men and older women, men speak on behalf of women. And when a man speaks, a woman doesn't talk again, because it's like you are disrespecting what the man is saying. So I knew in those contexts, even though if women are present, they won't be able to talk about their experiences or their expectations. And again, this was why I thought we must come in, because in the Gambia, for instance, over 51% of the population are women. And if we're looking at human rights violations, we must take that step to make sure that we're putting things in the right place to ensure women are represented and allowed to voice their views and opinions and experiences as well.
All right, that's awesome. I find fascinating. You said taking into account how to include women while overcoming those cultural and societal expectations. And what are some of the things that, you feel like, can I say, initiated so that the women could overcome those cultural, social barriers?
Mm-hmm. So I came up with the idea of the women only listening circles. We started by holding community dialogues, and then we realized that when we held community dialogues, people will speak, but even where a woman or two spoke, it wasn't much. They were just in agreement with the men or not really. And basically you had to force them, or give them the mic and say, please say something. So we decided to add the women only listening circle. So every time we visited a community, we take a women only safe space where we brought just women together and provide them with that confidential space to share their experience, to talk about their expectations, what they wanted to see in the transitional justice process. Or for instance, if women really wanted to go through the Truth Commission, how we use that space to explain the transitional justice process, the different techniques that were available for women. So for instance, the Truth Commission had the option where women could testify off cameras. So we provided them with all this information. But in addition to that, we used that space because for me, since the beginning of the TRRC, one of the things, what my emphasis was that we cannot focus women's experience on the guilt of the president, like what did the former president do? Because if we did that, we were risking highlighting the other factors, like the structural issues, like the root causes of violence. We all know violence doesn't occur in a vacuum. Usually when these violations happen, there were already existing factors that enabled it. So for us, we as an organization as well, we really wanted to highlight that there are sociocultural dynamics that made it conducive to abuse women. And we didn't want to just talk about rape as in by the state. We wanted to highlight the existing structure. So when we had these listening circles, women on these safe spaces, we used that opportunity to ask women, what is going on in your communities? And we linked that to the current transitional justice. We talked about issues around female genital mutilation, child marriage, poor maternal care. We brought in all these issues, and through that, we were able to get women to open up and share their experiences. And we were able to connect people, especially women victims, directly to the Truth Commission. But we also provided women the option, because for some women, they wanted to share what happened to them. But because in our society, we have very, very strong culture of silence around sexual violence. As you know, in most African countries, it's the same. There's this stigma and discrimination, and women fear that when they talk about especially sexual violence and other people find out, what happens to them then when they go back to their communities. So we wanted to make sure that women knew the risk involved as well, but also for those who were really ready to share, we supported them with psychosocial support to prepare them to take part in the formal truth commission. And for other women, we were able to document their experiences. So for some of the women, they'll be like, I want to share my story, but I don't want to go to the truth commission. So for those women, we also took their experiences, and at the end of the truth commission, we produced a shadow report. And this shadow report highlighted the experiences of women and also how violence against women trickles down. You know, for example, where we saw a father who was, for instance, murdered and left a wife and daughters. What happened to these people, like these secondary victims? We wanted to highlight that for women, the violations continue. It's not like a one-off, like a father could have been killed or sent to prison, and then that ended up causing their daughters to drop out of school or sent into early marriage. Our report highlighted all these secondary impacts of the dictatorship and how that continued to affect women and girls in the country. And we also highlighted the fact that for sexual violence did happen to many women, but just because of the culture of silence and the fear of stigma and discrimination stopped a lot of women from coming forward. So those were the kind of things that we were able to pull out by providing these safe spaces and women-only listening circles during the TJ process.
That's so awesome. The creation of those safe spaces for women, I think it also builds a sort of solidarity in some aspects and giving confidence. I mean, we do see in a lot of readings in general about transitional justice processes that, you know, creating a table is always in a big room of everybody with a sector holder, but actually intentionally creating spaces where those voices can still be heard beyond just sitting there, you know, like that's such an awesome example of that. And then when we're talking about the shadow report, for instance, and sort of how it highlighted the experiences of women in sexual violence during the dictatorship, how do you see such a report and the experiences it's highlighting being translated into something for, you know, the public? Because, you know, there's always this worry in transitional justice that things just end at policy level, and you know, the policymakers, they read their report and then they keep quiet. But those experiences, especially seeing that they do have very strong connections with the past existing structures, how do you foresee that process of justice being brought to the public?
Yeah, good question. So, in fact, that's very important, because throughout my work, this is one thing that I am also cognizant of, where we bring out reports. In the Gambia, over 40% of our older generation, women, are illiterate. They've not been to school. So we have these documents and these reports, even the TRRC report and the white paper. They are all in English, and they are reports that are accessible on the internet. Many victims don't have access to that. So one of the things that we've done, not just with the report, but also throughout the transitional justice process, I like the word intentionally, and that's what I was looking for, and you said it. We would intentionally go the extra mile to make sure that we are reaching women. So one of the approaches that we also adopted, in addition to the listening circles and safe spaces, we used in the Gambia, we have the traditional communicators. These are women in our communities who are good at sharing messages at the community level. We wanted to find structures that were already existing within our context and used it as a mechanism to popularize the TJ process and to send information to women. So we train these traditional communicators on, for instance, transitional justice, on issues around sexual violence, on when the report came out. And these women would go back into their communities where they know that they would find women and share the information with them. We also use community radios, because we find that in the community level, a lot of the women, like when they are cooking or when they're in their farms, they take their little radios to listen to what is going on. So we use these community radios in local languages. We interpreted these reports and we shared these messages on community radio so that we were reaching women. And we also go to the community. And just last month, we went on a nationwide caravan tour where we went with young comedians, because we also, in the work with sexual violence victims, we also wanted to bring young people, youth. We have a high population of youth. And just like women, youth are also another group that is often marginalized. And especially younger women who are most vulnerable to sexual violence. We went with young comedians, young poets, and young musicians that are very popular within the Gambian youth. And we went around the country sharing the TRRC report and recommendations and findings. And we also incorporated, social media in this, like TikTok. So whilst we are on the ground reaching to people, we were also using that space. We know that people who have big follow on TikTok, we went with a group of them who, when we were in the community, then they were using their TikTok accounts to update. And we saw how young people were really, really engaging and asking questions and coming back. And throughout with these processes, we use local languages so that communities understand. We don't go and speak English to them. We take the message in our own local languages so that communities understand what the reports consist of.
I really like the inclusion of young people, but especially young women generally, because obviously you start to internalize all of those silences as sort of ways to behave. So that's, yeah. I wish you guys had invited me to come.
Yeah.
And see it. It sounds awesome. So I can see from how we've been discussing that this goes without saying, but a very passionate subject for you. But it's also a very heavy subject. So what motivates you to keep going, keep doing this?
It can be very challenging, especially for us in the Gambia, where the legacies of dictatorship, where we were silenced for so many years, and where violations were ignored, especially sexual violence, impunity around sexual violence crimes have always been brushed under the carpet. So because of that, and all of a sudden, we have this movement of young women who are coming out, who are calling out perpetrators. We're using social media, we are coming out. And sometimes there's a backlash towards us that do this work. And that can be heavy and that can be difficult. But at the end of the day, we know that we have to make that extra effort. Otherwise, violence against women will continue. If women continues to be quiet about the violations that happen to us, it's easy for people to ignore it. So those are the things that motivate me. And also for me, seeing all these young women who are really determined, who want change, that also inspires me so much that I'm like, if I have all these young people who are so energetic, who are pushing things that we didn't see maybe like in the 2 generations ago, now we are seeing a whole young women movement coming forward and fighting patriarchy and saying enough is enough, the injustice. That is really inspiring, and that really motivates me to continue the work.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can imagine the situations where it's always been censored. It's also difficult, even when that past president or structure has fallen, but that legacy where everyone's so used to telling you to keep quiet just sort of persists. In its own way. Then obviously there's the cultural issues of you women are now talking too much.
Yes, exactly.
The education is driving women crazy.
They're always like, our mothers were not like you. Who are these women? Who are you? Like, where are you from? And we often chat how the other day we were talking how Gambian men are not ready for this wave of women, because they're often like, I will have this conversation and men will be like, you young women now, you don't want to be married, you don't want to be like your mother. I mean, like, no, because yes, there are things that we appreciate about our mothers and our aunties, but the things that they were taking, we are saying no, we are not taking that. We have rights and you must respect our rights. And we all know that in every country, unless women come and demand for our rights, they're not going to give it to us. They will not give it to us.
Definitely. I think what I really appreciate about what you're saying for me is really linking these existing patterns of violence that happen with women out, even just, if you take the dictatorship out of the equation and look at how they really continue to persist and people normalize and make them, part of how we are, but trying to break them and speak about them more openly addresses beyond just after the TRC, but as people try to grapple with whatever the new normal really looks like.
Exactly. Interesting you said that. One of the things that I keep emphasizing during our former president, during the dictatorship years, what came out in the Truth Commission was that torture, murder, enforced disappearance, and other violations were rampant. But the day that, since Jammeh left, all those violations stopped, except sexual violence. So you look at all these human rights violations that were occurring, they all stopped when the dictatorship ended. But what did not stop? Sexual violence, because sexual violence affect women, but also because sexual violence was not just because of Jammeh. It was something that was within society before Jammeh, and it's something that is deeply rooted. And because of that, even though Jammeh and his dictatorship years ended, sexual violence continued to occur. And that shows us how deeply entrenched sexual violence is within our context, just like many other African countries or globally.
Yeah, this is so deep. And I guess that just takes us to, makes me very sad, but I'm enjoying talking to you so much. Our final question for you, what are the pressing concerns on the continent and in the work that you're doing that you think is where we really need to be focusing resources, attention, and everything?
So, for instance, in the Gambia, now our Truth Commission has ended recommendations. We are moving towards like reconciliation, peace building, and we're talking about reparations. And just like all these factors that continue to affect women, issues around reparations also would affect women because of being disadvantaged, because of the socio-cultural same issues will still continue to affect women. So for me, like moving forward, transitional justice anywhere, if transitional justice is to be successful, we must make sure that women are at the heart of it, that women are not an add-on, like an afterthought or a ticking box exercise where you think, oh, we must say that we had included 10 women or stuff. Women must be engaged meaningfully. Women must sit on the table. Women must make decisions about the process even before it starts and moving forward. When we think about, we must think about so for instance, for us with reparations right now, we already have existing structures that already discriminate against women, even issues around when reparations is given to women. So for instance, if it's monetary, we already have existing customary beliefs or laws that would tell you as a woman, you are not, if your husband was dead, you are not allowed to inherit if you don't have sons, if you don't have this. So we must eliminate all forms of discriminations against women. Otherwise, as a continent, we are not going to move forward. At the end of the day, women in all African countries, we are the majority. And any country that holds back women, it's not going to move forward. It is not going to develop. Women must have voices. Women must participate meaningfully. And on top of that, women must be in the decision-making places at all levels in our countries. Otherwise, we will continue to face challenges.
But definitely, I think that, and a very good, really, it's stayed with me, is the fact that when bringing the report into the public sphere, into people's everyday lives, just the use of the traditional communicators, the orators alone, I think that really touched me, because I think when we think about women being decision makers, we think about women with degrees and women with diplomas, but it goes beyond just that, because even the oral communicators, they know how to talk to the community. They don't need a degree to do that. They just know how to do it, and to value it, I guess, to also make that a thing of valuing what human resources we have, regardless of their educational qualifications. So that's quite a good thing to take from this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fatou, I've enjoyed this.
Me too. Thank you so much. Wonderful. It's
No, thank
lovely
you so
to see
much.
you.